So many of the movies that I grew up watching had a really similar theme. A ragtag band of misfits somehow end up on a team together. Raise your hand if you recognize any of these movies. Just so you know, these were basically I like that Leah just raised her hand. Yeah, all of them. That's her childhood as well. But as I name them, just know that these are my spirit animal movies from my childhood. So, The Mighty Ducks. Ducks fly together. The Little Giants. Ooh, fewer hands. That's a football one. The Big Green. The Big Green, okay. Ooh, that one's a little, my sister has her hand up for that one. Cool Runnings, okay. My girls did not want to watch that movie. Afterwards, they were like, that was so good. Thank you. Angels in the Outfield, recognize that one? Okay, some more hands, okay, right? No one would have wanted these teams. No one would have picked them. Almost everyone on these teams is an outcast of some sort, a reject. But through the magic of an inspiring coach or a team captain or some angels, right? The Mighty Ducks would learn to fly, and the Little Giants would overcome real giants, and the angels would win the pennant. These movies capture the strong underdog spirit in our culture. We love our underdogs. Right? The moment the Chiefs were about to win a third Super Bowl, everybody hated the Chiefs. And just a couple years ago, lots of people were cheering for the Chiefs. It happens that fast. We believe in our underdogs. There's nothing more American than an outmatched, outgunned group of colonists battling one of the world's great empires and winning. Underdog stories, they're deep in our DNA, and they show up everywhere in our media and our imaginations about how the world works. Tom Holland, the historian, not Spider-Man, wrote a massive book a few years ago telling the story of how Christianity transformed our world. Starting before the time of Jesus, he literally writes on every period of time up to today. And he has this one consistent argument through the whole book. The world we live in, our imaginations, the structures that organize our lives are so deeply shaped by the Christian story that we don't even realize it. Now, Tom Holland is not a Christian. He is explicitly agnostic, and yet he can see our culture's love of the underdog, and he can explain to you where this obsession comes from. It comes from the story of Jesus, from the Jewish and the Christian tradition. Holland does some really important historical work to show that the early Christian movement was so incredibly weird in the ancient world. Weird because of who made up the movement and who made it go. In the ancient world, underdogs were not people to celebrate or to root for. They were the people whose backs you used to build your empires. The poor were often seen as not fully human, not fully people. Their poverty was often a sign that they had been cursed by the gods, that they were immoral, that they were rejected, that they were less than. They deserved their status. They had less human value in the world. And so at a time when there was no such thing as upward mobility, nobody dreamed of moving up the social hierarchy, when almost nobody rose out of poverty to some higher social or economic status, the poor were seen as people to be used for the projects of the powerful. Right? So the poor were the ones that you enlisted as your soldiers, who you sacrificed to expand your borders. The poor, they were your builders, right? They were working the dangerous jobs to build your aqueducts and your coliseums. The poor were your farmers, worked to the bone to produce abundant food that they would never get to use to satisfy their own hungers. That's who the poor were in the ancient world. And so I like to imagine Jesus recruiting his disciples in a good old-fashioned pick'em. Jesus stands over here, and the King Herods and the Caesars, they stand over here to pick their team. And who do the kings of the earth pick first? We know this. It's the richest. It's the most powerful. It's those who have the most friends, who can be the most useful to them. It's those with the biggest armies. While one by one, Jesus goes, I'll take that fisherman. Ooh, I get the woman who's been possessed by the evil spirit. Okay, I'll take another fisherman. Ooh, I get the blind guy. I don't have enough fishermen. I need another one of those. Ooh, foreign woman whose life hasn't gone how she planned. She could be on my team. I'll take another blind man and a fisherman while we're at it. Right? It's a weird bunch. So weird that Jesus' cousin is deeply confused by it all. He's been locked away in prison, which he wasn't expecting. He's confused by the fact that he's in prison. And you get the sense that he's just not expecting any of this. He doesn't quite know what's going on. So he sends messengers to Jesus asking, are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? In other words, are you going to come let me out? And Jesus responds by sending back a list to him, a list of all the people who have joined his movement. This list is supposed to confirm for him that, yeah, I'm the one who is to come. And he says, the blind have received sight and they are with me. And the lame, they can now walk and they are following. Lepers are cleansed. They've joined us. The deaf can hear, and they're here too. And some people are alive now. They were dead, and they're giving their lives to me as well. And the poor, well, they are hearing the good news of the kingdom. This is the list that Jesus sends back to his cousin. And I love the last thing that Jesus then says to John. Blessed is the one who's not offended by me. And I hope you get why Jesus says this. Blessed are the powerless. Blessed are those who grieve over their life and their losses. Blessed are the unimportant. These people are blessed by God because they are the people God chooses to start his revolution with. And Jesus just understands this is going to offend a lot of people. And it's actually not all that different today. Bless you. Have you ever been passed over for a spot on a team? Have you ever been passed over for a job? For anything by someone who didn't seem to deserve it as much as you do? I mean, how does that feel? not good. That's the nicest way to say it. It feels terrible. It's brutal. You miss out on something because someone, maybe less qualified, less experienced, less worthy, gets it. Jesus understands that is exactly what he is doing. He's picking a team made up of people who totally do not deserve to be there. A group of people who are completely unworthy to be the inner circle of a revolutionary movement. People who are unworthy according to the measures of our world. The rich and the powerful, the influential and the godly tend to believe that a movement of God should start with them. And so Jesus says, blessed is the one who's not offended by me. Don't be offended by what I'm doing. It's going to upset you. It's going to unsettle you, but stay with me. This is part of why the good news is such good news for the poor. The rulers of our world like to make empty promises to the poor. Every movement ever has attempted to appeal to the poor. Fall in line. Do your part. Support me, and your life will improve. I will see to it. And so while rulers are filling their rosters with the rich and the powerful, they promise to protect the poor and to provide for them. But here is what blows my mind about Jesus and the kingdom that he is announcing. See, Jesus doesn't make promises to the poor about what he and his mighty team will do for them. Jesus doesn't make promises to the poor. Jesus partners with the poor. Jesus invites the poor onto his team and proclaims what he plans to do with them. That they're right at the heart and the center of his revolution. The good news is that in the kingdom of Jesus, the poor are not merely served, they are empowered to do the serving. They are also teaching others how to serve. And this highlights the other kind of major difference between the team that Jesus is picking and the teams that the Herods and the Caesars are building. See, Herod and Caesar, they need strength. They need swords. They are building a team that will powerfully conquer. They are playing a certain game. But Jesus and his team are playing another game entirely. Jesus is building a team that will take a towel and a wash basin, symbols from Jesus' final night. And they will take this towel and wash basin to wash the feet of their enemies. Jesus and his team will take up crosses and they will lay down their lives for their enemies. Jesus is starting a revolution of sacrifice and service, not an empire, just a new version of empire with swords and strength. And so right here's what's interesting to me. As much as we like and resonate with a good underdog story, and as much as our celebration of underdogs comes from Jesus, we can love the underdog and still miss the heart of what Jesus is up to. We can fail to see ourselves as underdogs who need a work of God, an invitation of God in our lives. We can fail to hear God partnering with underdogs. And we can fail to remember that underdogs are recruited to the team to play a different game than the game that the rulers of the world are playing. And so let me just say these one more time, and you can write them down. They might help you remember. We forget that we are underdogs. We forget that God partners with underdogs, and we forget that underdogs play a different game. Let me tell you a couple stories. I know a dad who goes to church, but is living a sad life. You heard the translation that Melody read for us earlier, happy. His life doesn't embody the happiness that we heard about. He had a son born premature. And in the hospital, this new dad's mom referred to this baby as a preemie. And this dad flipped out on her. He would rant and rave in the hospital about how his son wasn't a preemie. And he kept threatening to take the baby from the hospital, and doctors had to confront him at one point. This dad cannot honestly accept any form of powerlessness. Right? In his mind, strength is the only virtue. And to be born premature, to have any struggles is to be weak, and weakness in his mind is failure. The same dad recently went through a season of loss, a significant season. He lost his family in some pretty significant ways, and he lost the illusion of a perfect life. But rather than grieve that loss, rather than learn from it, he's just really angry. And his reaction is to attack others, those who he thinks has wronged him, to take from others, to hurt other people. The same dad, it's gonna seem random, but it's connected, stay with me, likes to tell his kids that he's friends with the President of the United States. It's not enough for him to say that he voted for him or likes him, but he needs his kids to think that their dad is friends with the president. He needs to be seen as important. Blessed are the powerless. Blessed are those who grieve great losses. Blessed are the unimportant. Notice, like this dad's sad life, the sadness isn't having a preemie baby or losing his family or not being friends with the president. It's actually in his inability to embrace the blessedness of an underdog life. To believe that in his powerlessness, he could truly experience God's power and presence. To believe that in his loss, he could experience the profound and comforting presence of God. And that in his insecurity, he could hear Jesus saying, I've picked you for my team. But he can't hear any of that. And that's why his life is so sad. Later in the Gospel of Matthew, contrasted with these statements of blessed or happy, Jesus says, woe to you. Woe to you if you have to be powerful. Woe to you if you can't be sad about things that are sad. Woe to you if you need to be important. We forget that we are underdogs. We refuse to see ourselves as underdogs. We also forget that God partners with underdogs. It's too easy to pity the powerless rather than partner with them. It's too easy to to look down on somebody and pat them on the head and treat them as though they're less than. And so there's this brutal situation the church gets in sometimes, where as churchgoers, we can forget that we are all powerless underdogs. And then we look at those that we presume are more powerless, have even less power than us over there, right? As though they are the underdogs and we are not. And we know that God wants to partner with us, but we don't see in others the partnership potential if they seem to be beneath or lack what we have. And so we just offer them our pity. There are all kinds of groups that we might pity in their powerlessness. Thinking about a friend of mine who's on Young Life staff. Her name is Jen, and she works with teenagers. And in the big picture of our world, right, when you look at who really has the power to make things happen in the world, teenagers, for the most part, are fairly powerless. And yet, that doesn't stop Jen from seeing God's desire to partner with teenagers. Their powerlessness doesn't stop God from partnering with them in beautiful ways. And so if anything, it actually makes them the best partners to work with. And so Jen has this group of teenagers, these brand new followers of Jesus who she's trying to get to do work crew this summer at camp because she wants them to see that God wants to partner with them, that they have a purpose in their life and it is found in partnering with God and God partnering with them. Every day, because of some of the youth ministry I do and some of my presence on campuses, I get to see God at work in the lives of powerless teenagers. And I see God partnering with them to change the culture of their schools. I see God partnering with them to lead their friends to Jesus. And I see God taking the powerless, their powerlessness, and giving them this joy of working with God. We forget that God partners with underdogs. And finally, we forget that God's underdogs play a different game. Our great American underdog story shows us how badly we get this. When we tell the story of America and the American Revolution, it's really easy for us to forget that Jesus called his followers to take up crosses and not muskets. We often forget that the Revolutionary War, like the Civil War after it, was fought by people who professed Jesus as Lord and Savior on both sides of the war. The revolution that Christianity brought to the world, but specifically the Roman Empire, had nothing to do with weapons of war. The team that Jesus built was playing a different game from the very beginning. Like in the early years of the church, this team, it worked so hard to build a different kind of kingdom with a very different value system, a very different social structure, a very different economy. And at no point in those early years did the church ever tell Rome, you need to do what we're doing. They just let Rome play their own game. And the church played Jesus' game. The church just lived this new way of life among themselves. And it turns out when you live this kind of way, it just has this natural effect of impacting your neighbors' lives around you, of sort of the blessing of this community overflowing and impacting those who live around you, so that more and more people were like, this game kind of sucks. That game, that is where happiness is. Somewhere along the way, we forgot the church's calling. And we started to think that being an underdog meant we were supposed to win the game that the bully is playing. Like we thought, our job is to defeat the bully. And we'll just take his job. We'll become the new bully and we'll play the same game. We'll just play it better. But the underdogs on Jesus' team cannot win the bully's game because it's not the game that we were meant to play. The powerless aren't blessed because they become powerful. They are blessed because they become partners in God's kingdom. Those who grieve great losses aren't blessed because they get everything back or because they're now strong enough to protect their stuff in the future. They are blessed because they know the intimate presence of God, the great comforter. And the unimportant aren't blessed because they get positions at the right and the left hand of Jesus, given positions of importance. They are blessed because God gives them an inheritance that they don't deserve. We are the salt of the earth. But we lose our saltiness when we play the wrong game. We are the light of the world, but we have nothing to shine when we play the wrong game. We are a city on a hill, but is God's good news seen at work in us if we come down and play the same game as everybody else? All of this is a gift from the one who sees us, who heals us, and who picks us to be on his team. My fellow underdogs, our coach is calling us to the table. This is our team meal where we meet with Jesus and where he changes our hearts and our imaginations so that we might partner with him to play the game he made us to play.